You know what nobody tells you about running away? The thing you're running from follows you everywhere. It's inside your head, in your habits, in the way you still reach for your phone at 3 a.m. expecting messages that will never come. I thought Thailand would fix me. I thought putting 80 miles between me and my old life would somehow make me a different person. But the East doesn't care about your Western problems. It has its own plans for broken men like me. And those plans? They're nothing like what you see in the travel blogs. If our stories resonate with you, don't forget to like, comment, and tell us where you're watching from. This story was shared with us by one of our longtime viewers. He asked us not to share his name, but he wanted his experience heard. I was sitting in my kitchen in Longueuil at 4 in the morning, staring at divorce papers that had been sitting there for 3 weeks. The wine bottle next to them was empty. I'd finished it sometime around midnight while reading the same legal jargon over and over. 25 years of marriage, reduced to asset division and custody arrangements. Linda had been patient, maybe too patient. She'd waited for me to change, to find purpose, to become the man she married, instead of this hollow version who came home every day from the insurance office and disappeared into the basement to watch Netflix until I fell asleep on the couch. "Dad, we need to talk." That's what my son Michael had said 3 months ago when he came by the house. 22 years old, fresh out of university, already more successful than I'd ever been. "Mom's not happy. None of us are happy. You need help." But I didn't want help. I wanted everyone to leave me alone so I could figure out what went wrong, when exactly I'd stopped being a person and started being a paycheck with legs. My daughter Sarah had stopped calling altogether. The last time we spoke, she'd asked if I was okay, and I'd snapped at her. "I'm fine." Everyone needs to stop asking if I'm fine. But I wasn't fine. I hadn't been fine for years, maybe decades. I was 54 years old and felt like I'd never actually lived a single day of my life. That's when I found the YouTube video. Living in Thailand. On $800 a month. Paradise for pensioners. The guy in the video was maybe 60, sitting on a beach chair with a Thai woman half his age, talking about how his pension went 3 times further here, how the people were friendly, how life was simple and meaningful. I watched 17 more videos that night. Men from Canada, Australia, England, all talking about how Thailand had saved them from meaningless Western existence. I did the math. My severance package from the insurance company was $43,000. In Thailand, that could last me 2 years, maybe 3 if I was careful, long enough to figure out who I was supposed to be, long enough to start over completely. The divorce papers were asking for half of everything anyway. This way, Linda could have the house, the car, the savings account. I'd just disappear and let everyone move on with their lives. "I'm going to Thailand," I told Linda when she came by to pick up some clothes. She was standing in our bedroom, her bedroom now, folding sweaters into a suitcase. She looked at me like I'd said I was going to Mars. "For vacation?" she asked. Her voice was careful, the way it got when she was trying not to trigger one of my moods. "No, to live, to start over." I handed her the divorce papers. Signed. "You can have everything. I just need to go." She sat down on the bed, still holding one of her sweaters. "Raymond, you can't just run away to Thailand. That's not how life works." "How does life work, Linda?" "Because I've been doing it your way for 25 years. And look where it got us." I wasn't angry. I was just tired. Tired of pretending that staying in Longueuil and working at Metropolitan Life and mowing the lawn every Saturday was ever going to make me feel alive. "What about the kids? What about your job?" "The kids don't want to see me anyway." "And the job?" I laughed. But it came out bitter. "I process insurance claims, Linda. I could die tomorrow, and they'd replace me by Friday." She didn't argue with that last part. Maybe because she knew it was true. Maybe because she was relieved I was finally making a decision about something, even if it was the wrong decision. 2 weeks later, I was on a plane to Bangkok with 2 suitcases and a one-way ticket. The woman at Air Canada asked if I was sure I didn't want return travel, and I told her I was sure. What was I going to return to? An empty apartment and a job that barely paid enough to cover rent in a city where I had no friends and no family who wanted to see me. The flight was 20 hours with a layover in Vancouver. I'd never been on a plane for more than 4 hours, and by hour 12, I was questioning everything. The man next to me was reading a business magazine. Completely comfortable, like flying halfway around the world was something he did every weekend. I kept thinking about Linda, probably sleeping in our bed alone for the first time in decades. Was she relieved? Sad? Had she already called a lawyer to finalize everything? I'd downloaded a translation app and a guidebook about Bangkok, but sitting there in that cramped seat, I realized I didn't know anything about Thailand except what I'd seen in YouTube videos made by other middle-aged Western men who'd probably been just as lost as I was. What if the videos were lies? What if it was just as empty and meaningless as life in Canada, except now I'd be broke and alone in a country where I didn't speak the language? When the plane started descending into Bangkok, I looked out the window at the sprawling city below, the humidity already fogging up the glass. Everything looked foreign and overwhelming. For a moment, I wanted to ask the flight attendant if I could just stay on the plane and fly back to Montreal. But then I remembered sitting in that kitchen at 4 a.m., staring at divorce papers and feeling like I was already dead. At least in Thailand, I'd be dead somewhere interesting. The first breath of Bangkok air hit me like a wall. It was hot and thick and smelled like exhaust and food, and something else I couldn't identify. The airport was massive and crowded, and everyone was moving with purpose except me. I stood there with my 2 suitcases, trying to figure out how to get a taxi, watching all these people who knew where they were going and what they were doing with their lives. The taxi driver spoke broken English, but enough to understand when I showed him the address of the apartment I'd rented online. 40 minutes through traffic that made Montreal look like a small town, past street vendors and temples and apartment buildings that looked nothing like the glossy photos from the travel websites. By the time we pulled up to my building, I was already sweating through my shirt and wondering what the hell I'd done. My apartment was on the 4th floor of a building that looked like it had been built in the 1970s and hadn't been updated since. No elevator. The hallway smelled like cooking oil and cigarettes, and I could hear voices speaking Thai through thin walls. My apartment was maybe 400 square feet, a bed, a tiny kitchen, a bathroom with a shower that was basically just a hose attached to the wall. The air conditioner was broken, and when I called the landlord, he told me in English that was worse than my Thai, that someone would come, maybe tomorrow, maybe next week. I sat on the bed and looked around at what was supposed to be my new life. In Canada, this would have been condemned housing. Here, it was what $43,000 got you if you were trying to stretch it as far as possible. I'd left a 4-bedroom house in Longueuil for this. I'd left a job that paid $60,000 a year for unemployment in a country where I was legally forbidden to work. That first week was the longest of my life. I'd wake up at 5 a.m. because of the time difference and the heat, then spend the day walking around Bangkok trying to feel like I belonged somewhere. Everything was a challenge. Buying food meant pointing at things and hoping they weren't too spicy. Getting a SIM card for my phone required 3 trips to different stores and a lot of frustrated hand gestures from people trying to help me. The loneliness was worse than anything I'd felt in Canada. At least there, I could understand what people were saying when they ignored me. Here, I was surrounded by millions of people having conversations I couldn't follow, living lives I couldn't comprehend. I started ordering food delivery just so I wouldn't have to go outside and feel foreign. I'd sit in my apartment with broken air conditioning, eating pad thai from plastic containers, and video calling my empty house in Longueuil just to hear the familiar ring of the North American phone system. By day 6, I was ready to buy a return ticket. I'd made a mistake. A massive, expensive mistake that had cost me my marriage, my job, and probably any chance of rebuilding a normal life back home. I was sitting in my apartment at 3 in the morning, sweating and miserable, when I decided I needed a drink. Not delivered beer from 7-Eleven, but a real drink in a real bar where maybe I could talk to someone, anyone, in English. I found a small place near Khao San Road, the kind of bar that catered to tourists and expats. Dark wood, cheap beer, AC, that actually worked. There were maybe a dozen people there, mostly Western men my age or older, all looking like they were trying to solve the same problems I was. I ordered a singer and sat at the bar, not really planning to talk to anyone, just wanting to be around people who spoke my language. First week, the bartender was a young Thai woman, maybe 25, with excellent English and a smile that seemed genuinely curious rather than professionally polite. That obvious? I asked. You have the look, like you're not sure if you made a mistake or the best decision of your life. She was cleaning glasses while she talked, efficient but relaxed. I'm Prani. I work here 3 nights a week, but I'm studying business at university during the day. Raymond. And yeah, definitely feeling like I made a mistake. Where are you from? She set down a fresh beer without me asking for it. Canada. Montreal. Well, Longueuil. But nobody knows where that is. I know Longueuil, she said, and I was surprised enough that I actually looked at her instead of staring into my beer. My cousin lived there for 2 years. She said it was very cold, but the people were nice. We talked for an hour. She asked about Canada, about why I'd come to Thailand, about my family. I found myself telling her about the divorce, about feeling lost, about not knowing what I was supposed to do with the rest of my life. She listened without judgment, asked follow-up questions that showed she was actually paying attention. When I told her about my job processing insurance claims, she laughed. That sounds very boring, she said. Maybe Thailand will help you find something more interesting to do with your time. Like what? I can't work here legally. I don't speak Thai. I'm 54 years old. Age is just a number, she said. And you can learn Thai. I could teach you some basics if you want. As for work, there are ways for foreigners to start businesses here if they have the right partners. Something about the way she said partners made me look at her more carefully. She was beautiful in a way that Western women my age weren't anymore, or maybe they were, but they'd stopped looking at men like me years ago. Prani had long black hair and the kind of smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room worth talking to. You're very kind to listen to an old man complain about his problems, I said. You're not old, and everyone has problems. That's what makes life interesting. She leaned against the bar, and I caught a hint of perfume that was floral and subtle. Besides, I like talking to people from other countries. It helps me practice my English, and I learn about different cultures. When the bar closed at midnight, she asked if I wanted to walk with her to the taxi stand. Bangkok felt different with her next to me, less overwhelming, more like a place where I might actually belong. We talked about her studies, her plans to open her own business someday, her family in the provinces who were counting on her to succeed. What kind of business? I asked. Restaurant, maybe. Or tourism. Something that helps people, but also makes money. She smiled. In Thailand we have a saying, make merit, make money, do good things, but also survive. At the taxi stand, she wrote her phone number on a napkin. If you want to learn some Thai, or if you need help understanding Bangkok, you can call me. It's not easy being alone in a new country. I watched her taxi disappear into the Bangkok traffic and realized that for the first time since I'd arrived, I was actually looking forward to tomorrow. I called Prani 2 days later. She suggested meeting at a temple near my apartment, said she could show me some of the cultural side of Bangkok that tourists usually miss. I'd never been particularly religious, but walking through Wat Pho with her felt like the first meaningful thing I'd done in months. She explained the history, the significance of the different Buddha statues, the proper way to show respect. Thai people believe that everything happens for a reason, she said as we sat in the shade of an ancient tree. Maybe you came to Thailand not just to escape something, but to find something. Like what? I don't know. That's for you to discover. She was wearing a simple white dress that made her look younger than her 25 years, but when she talked about Buddhism and Thai culture, she sounded wise beyond her age. Western people, you think too much about the past and the future. Thai people, we try to focus on right now, this moment. Over the next few weeks, I saw Prani almost every day. She introduced me to her friends, took me to markets where I could buy fresh fruit and vegetables instead of living on 7-Eleven food, taught me basic Thai phrases that made simple transactions easier. With her help, Bangkok started feeling less like a foreign city and more like a place where I might actually build a life. She was different from Linda, different from Western women in general. Where Linda had been critical and demanding, always pushing me to be more ambitious or more social or more something, Prani seemed accepting of who I was. She laughed at my stories about working in insurance, asked genuine questions about Canada, never made me feel like I wasn't good enough or successful enough or interesting enough. "You're very kind to spend so much time with me," I told her one evening over dinner at a small restaurant she'd recommended. "You must have better things to do than babysit a confused Canadian." "I like spending time with you," she said simply. "You're different from most Western men who come to Thailand. You actually listen when people talk." "What do you mean?" "Many foreign men, they come here and they think Thai women exist just to serve them. They don't want to learn about our culture or our language or who we really are. They just want someone young and pretty to make them feel important." She sipped her mango juice thoughtfully. "You ask about my family, my studies, my dreams. You treat me like a person, not like an accessory." That night, she let me walk her home to the small apartment she shared with 2 other university students. At her door, she kissed me on the cheek, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years, wanted, valued, like maybe I had something to offer besides just a paycheck and a willingness to be ignored. "My mother is visiting Bangkok next week," she said. "Would you like to meet her? She's curious about the Canadian man who's been teaching me about Western culture." Meeting Prani's mother felt like a bigger step than anything I'd done in my marriage to Linda. Mrs. Suwan was a small, elegant woman in her 50s who owned a small shop in Chiang Mai. She spoke limited English, but Prani translated, and I found myself talking about my life in Canada, my work, my children, my hopes for this new chapter in Thailand. "My mother says you have kind eyes," Prani translated after a long conversation in Thai. "She says Western men who come to Thailand usually look angry or desperate, but you look sad but hopeful. What did you tell her about me? That you're a good man who lost his way, but you're trying to find it again." Prani smiled. "She likes that. She says Thai people understand about starting over." Mrs. Suwan invited me to dinner at their family temple the next day. It was a small ceremony honoring Prani's late father, and I was surprised to be included in something so personal. I didn't understand most of what was happening, but I participated as best I could, lighting incense and offering prayers for a man I'd never met, but who had clearly raised an exceptional daughter. After the ceremony, Mrs. Suwan pulled me aside and spoke to me directly in English that was broken but earnest. "You take care my daughter. She good girl, work very hard. You help her, she help you." That's when Prani first mentioned that her mother needed money for medical treatments. Nothing dramatic, just diabetes medication that was expensive in Thailand. "I don't want to ask you for help," she said. "But if you could lend me maybe 2,000 baht for her medicine, I can pay you back when I get my salary from the bar." 2,000 baht was about 60 Canadian dollars. I gave it to her without hesitation. It felt good to be needed, to be able to solve a problem for someone I cared about. In Canada, my money had just been expected, taken for granted. Here, it made a real difference in someone's life. "You don't have to pay me back," I told her. "I want to help." She hugged me, and I realized I was falling in love for the first time in decades. Not the comfortable, habitual love I'd had with Linda, but the kind of love that made you want to be a better person. 2 months into our relationship, Prani came to me with an idea that would change everything. We were sitting in my apartment, which she'd helped me decorate with plants and Thai artwork until it actually felt like home when she brought up her dream of opening a restaurant. My cousin Somchai owns a small place in Thongla, but he's struggling, she said. The location is good, near the BTS station. Lots of foot traffic. But he doesn't have money for renovations or new equipment, and he doesn't understand marketing to foreign customers. That's too bad, I said, not really understanding where the conversation was going. I was thinking, she said carefully, maybe this could be an opportunity for both of us. You have business experience from Canada, and I understand Thai culture and the restaurant industry. If we could find investors to help Somchai renovate, we could become partners with him. She had it all planned out. The restaurant needed about $15,000 for new kitchen equipment, fresh paint, better furniture, and a marketing campaign to attract expat customers. In return, we'd get a 30% ownership stake, and Prani would manage day-to-day operations while I handled the business side: inventory, finances, customer relations. I know it's a big investment, she said, but restaurants in good locations can make very good money in Bangkok. And it would give you a real purpose here, something meaningful to do with your experience. I visited the restaurant the next day. It was small but well located, with potential that was obvious even to someone who'd never worked in food service. Somchai was a friendly man in his 40s, who spoke decent English and seemed genuinely enthusiastic about the partnership. He showed me the books, explained the local customer base, outlined his vision for attracting more international diners. Thai food for Thai people is different from Thai food for foreigners, he explained. We need someone who understands what Western people want, but also someone who respects authentic Thai cooking. Prani had prepared a business plan that was more thorough than anything I'd seen in my insurance career. Market analysis, profit projections, renovation timelines, marketing strategies. She'd clearly put weeks of work into this proposal. Where did you learn to do all this? I asked her that evening. University business classes, she said. And I've been thinking about this dream for a long time. I just never had a partner who could make it happen. That word partner hung in the air between us. She wasn't just talking about business anymore. She was talking about building a life together, creating something that belonged to both of us. I had enough money. My severance package was sitting in a Thai bank account, earning almost nothing, while I lived off a small portion each month. $15,000 would still leave me with enough to live comfortably for another year, and if the restaurant succeeded, I'd have income instead of just burning through savings. More than that, I'd have purpose. I'd wake up each morning with somewhere to go, something to accomplish, a reason to learn Thai and understand the culture. I'd be building something instead of just running away from something. I want to do this, I told her, but I want to do it right. Legal contracts, proper partnership agreements, everything documented. She hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. You won't regret this, she whispered. We're going to build something beautiful together. The next week was a whirlwind of paperwork, bank transfers, and meetings with lawyers who specialized in foreign investment in Thailand. Everything seemed legitimate and professional. Prani had found a law firm that dealt regularly with expat business ventures, and they walked me through the legal requirements for foreign ownership, tax implications, and partnership structures. I transferred $15,000 to a joint account that required both my signature and Prani's to access. It felt like the biggest leap of faith I'd ever taken, but also the most excited I'd felt about anything in years. The renovation started immediately. Prani quit her job at the bar to focus full-time on the restaurant, and I found myself spending my days at the construction site, learning about Thai building practices, working alongside contractors who spoke no English but communicated through gestures and laughter. For the first time since arriving in Thailand, I felt useful. You're different now, Prani said one evening as we reviewed paint samples and furniture catalogs. More confident, like you remember who you are. She was right. I was remembering things about myself I'd forgotten during all those years of processing insurance claims and coming home to a wife who'd stopped seeing me as anything more than a source of household income. I had opinions about business decisions. I could solve problems. I could lead projects and motivate people. I think I was just lost for a while, I said. But this feels right. Building something together, being partners. Real partners, she said, and leaned over to kiss me. In business and in life. We started talking about marriage. Nothing official yet, but the kind of casual planning that couples do when they're imagining a future together. She wanted a small ceremony at her family temple in Chiang Mai. I wanted to bring my kids from Canada to meet her, to see that I'd found something worth building my life around. The restaurant renovation took 6 weeks. When it was finished, the place looked completely transformed. Clean, modern, but still authentically Thai. We'd kept the best elements of the original design, while updating everything that was worn or outdated. The kitchen had new equipment, the dining room had comfortable furniture and soft lighting, and Prani had designed a menu that offered both traditional Thai dishes and modified versions for Western palates. Grand opening in 2 weeks, Somchai announced. We'll invite food bloggers, local expats, everyone. This is going to be very successful. I believed him. I believed in the restaurant, in our partnership, in the life Prani and I were building together. For the first time in years, I was proud of something I'd accomplished. That's when the first red flag appeared, though I didn't recognize it at the time. Raymond. We need to talk about something, Prani said one evening. We were in my apartment, and she seemed nervous, fidgeting with her phone instead of looking at me directly. What's wrong? It's about the restaurant. Somchai says we need more money for marketing and additional equipment. About $5,000. I felt my stomach tighten. We already paid for marketing. It was in the business plan. I know, but he says the marketing company wants payment up front, and we need a new refrigeration unit because the old one isn't working properly. She finally looked at me, and her eyes were pleading. I'm sorry to ask for more money. I know we agreed on $15,000. Let me talk to Somchai directly, I said. I want to understand exactly what we're paying for. He's very busy with the pre-opening preparations, she said quickly. And you know his English isn't perfect for explaining financial details. I can handle the communication. Something felt wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on what. The restaurant looked ready to open. The equipment seemed fine when I'd visited 2 days earlier. But Prani had handled all the local negotiations, all the relationships with contractors and suppliers. Maybe there were cultural complexities I wasn't understanding. Can we schedule a meeting with him and the lawyer? I asked. I want to review the additional expenses before we transfer any more money. Of course, she said, but she looked relieved when I agreed to the $5,000, like she'd been expecting me to refuse entirely. I transferred the money the next day. It left me with about $23,000 in savings, still enough to live comfortably for another year, but the safety net was getting smaller. The grand opening was supposed to happen 2 weeks later, but it kept getting delayed. First, it was problems with permits. Then it was issues with staff training. Then it was problems with suppliers. Each delay came with an explanation that sounded reasonable, and each explanation came through Prani rather than directly from Somchai. Maybe I should visit the restaurant more often, I suggested after the third delay. Help with whatever's causing these problems. Somchai is very traditional, she said. He feels embarrassed when foreign partners see problems before they're solved. It's a Thai cultural thing about saving face. I accepted that explanation because I wanted to believe it, because the alternative was thinking that the woman I loved was lying to me, and because I still didn't understand Thai culture well enough to know what was normal and what wasn't. But I started paying more attention. When I called Prani during the day, she was often unavailable, claiming to be in meetings with suppliers or dealing with restaurant business. When I suggested coming to help with specific tasks, she always had reasons why that wouldn't work. When I asked detailed questions about the delays, her answers were vague and deflected rather than addressing my concerns directly. 3 months after our original opening date, I decided to visit the restaurant unannounced. I took a taxi to Thongla and walked to the address where we'd supposedly been renovating and preparing to launch our business. The restaurant was closed. Not just closed for the day, abandoned. The windows were covered with brown paper, and there was a for rent sign in Thai and English hanging on the door. I peered through a gap in the paper and saw empty space. No kitchen equipment, no furniture, no sign that anyone had been working there recently. I stood on that sidewalk for 10 minutes, trying to process what I was seeing. Maybe we'd moved locations. Maybe there had been a problem with the lease and Somchai had found a better space. Maybe there was a simple explanation that would make sense. Once Prani explained it. I called her immediately. "Raymond, how are you? I was just thinking about you." "I'm at the restaurant," I said. "It's empty." Silence on the other end of the line. Then, "What do you mean?" "I mean it's empty, Prani. Closed. There's a for rent sign on the door." "Where is our restaurant?" "Oh, that." "Yes, we had to move locations. Somchai found a much better space, but we're still setting it up. I was going to tell you tonight." "Where's the new location?" Another pause. I don't remember the exact address. Somchai handles all that, but I can take you there tomorrow." Every instinct I had was screaming that something was wrong, but I didn't want to believe it. I'd invested $20,000. More than that, I'd invested my heart in this relationship, my hope for a meaningful life in Thailand. If Prani was lying to me, then I was back to being a lonely, middle-aged man in a foreign country with no purpose and rapidly diminishing savings. "Can you meet me now?" I asked. "I'd like to see the new restaurant today." "I'm in class," she said. "University. But tomorrow morning, okay? I'll show you everything." I went home and spent the night staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself that there was an innocent explanation. Maybe Thai business practices were different. Maybe restaurant startups were always chaotic and full of last-minute changes. Maybe I was being paranoid because I'd never invested in anything riskier than government bonds. Prani came to my apartment the next morning with coffee and pastries from my favorite bakery, acting like everything was normal. "So where's the new restaurant?" I asked before she could sit down. "Raymond, we need to talk about something." She sat on my bed and patted the space next to her. "There have been some complications with the business." "What kind of complications?" "Somchai had some problems with creditors. The money we invested, it had to be used to pay off some debts so we wouldn't lose the business license. I felt like I was falling through the floor." "What debts?" "This is the first I'm hearing about any debts." "I didn't want to worry you." Somchai thought he could handle it quietly, but the situation became more serious. She reached for my hand, but I pulled it away. "The good news is that he's found new investors. And once this is resolved, we'll have an even better restaurant than we originally planned." "Where's my money, Prani?" "It's invested in the business. It's not gone. It's just temporarily tied up while we resolve these legal issues. I want to speak to Somchai directly today. He's in Chiang Mai, dealing with the creditors. But he asked me to tell you that he's very grateful for your investment, and he promises that once this is resolved..." "Stop." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at Bangkok traffic and trying to think clearly. "I want documentation. Bank statements, receipts, contracts, everything. And I want the contact information for the lawyers we worked with." "Of course," she said. But her voice sounded different now. Less warm, more cautious. "I can get all of that for you. Today. I want it today. Some of the documents are at Somchai's office, and the lawyers are. There might be delays because of the legal complications, but I'll get you everything as soon as possible." That afternoon, I went to the law firm we'd supposedly used for the partnership agreements. The receptionist spoke enough English to understand what I was asking for, but after checking their files and making several phone calls, she told me they had no record of representing me or any restaurant partnership involving a foreigner named Raymond. I walked out of that law office feeling like I was going to throw up. $20,000. Gone. Not invested, not temporarily tied up, stolen. I'd been played by someone I trusted, someone I loved, someone I'd been planning to marry. But even then, I wasn't ready to accept the full truth. I convinced myself that maybe Prani was being scammed too. That maybe Somchai had lied to both of us. That maybe she was as much a victim as I was. I called her that evening and told her about the law firm. "That's very strange," she said. "Maybe Somchai used a different firm for the final paperwork. Let me check with him." "Prani, I need you to be honest with me. Is there really a restaurant? Is there really a partnership? Or have I been sending money to pay for something that doesn't exist?" "Raymond, why would you think that? I love you. We're building a life together. Why would I lie about something so important?" Because she sounded genuinely hurt by my suspicion, because I wanted to believe her more than I wanted to face reality, I gave her one more chance. "Okay," I said. "But I need proof. Documents, bank statements, something concrete that shows where my money went." "I'll get everything together," she promised. "And I'll arrange for you to speak directly with Somchai as soon as he gets back from Chiang Mai." But Somchai never came back from Chiang Mai, and the promised documents never materialized. Every day brought new excuses, new delays, new reasons why the proof I needed wasn't available yet. Prani started becoming defensive when I asked questions, accusing me of not trusting her, of being a typical controlling Western man who didn't understand Thai business culture. "If you don't trust me," she said during one particularly heated conversation, "then maybe we shouldn't be together." The threat of losing her scared me more than the possibility of losing the money. I'd already lost my marriage, my family, my career. Prani was the only thing keeping me from being completely alone in a foreign country where I didn't belong. So I backed off. I stopped asking about the restaurant, stopped demanding documentation, stopped insisting on meeting with Somchai. I told myself that maybe the money would come back eventually, that maybe the business would work out, that maybe I was being impatient with processes I didn't understand. But I started paying attention to other things. How Prani always had money for new clothes and expensive dinners, despite supposedly quitting her job to focus on the restaurant. How she was often unavailable during certain hours of the day, claiming to be in business meetings that never seemed to produce any results. How she deflected whenever I asked specific questions about our future together. One evening, I followed her. I'm not proud of it, but I was running out of money and running out of patience, and I needed to know what was really happening. She told me she was going to a business dinner with potential investors, but instead of going to a restaurant, her taxi took her to an upscale condominium building in Sukhumvit. I waited across the street for 2 hours. When she came out, she was with an older Thai man, maybe 60, well-dressed, and clearly comfortable with money. They were holding hands, and when he kissed her goodbye, it wasn't the kind of kiss you give a business partner. I confronted her the next day in my apartment. She came over with takeout food and her usual smile, acting like nothing had happened. "How was your business dinner last night?" I asked. "Very good," she said, setting containers of pad thai on my small table. "The investors are very interested in the restaurant project." "What restaurant project, Prani?" "Because I went to 3 different locations you've mentioned over the past month, and none of them exist." Her smile faded. "What do you mean?" "I mean I followed you last night. I saw you with him, the older man, at the condo building." She sat down slowly, not looking at me. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. "It's not what you think," she finally said. "Then tell me what it is." It's complicated. His name is Niran. And yes, he helps me financially sometimes. But it's not romantic. He's like a father figure, someone who's been supporting my education. "I saw him kiss you, Prani." That wasn't fatherly. She started crying then, but they felt like calculated tears, not genuine emotion. "Raymond, you don't understand Thai culture. Sometimes we have to do things to survive that Western people don't understand. I didn't want to hurt you, but I need his support to finish university. What about my support? What about the $20,000 I gave you for our restaurant? That money is still invested in the business. It's just taking longer than we expected because of legal complications. Show me the bank records. Show me anything that proves there's actually a business. I can't right now because there is no business, I said. There never was a business. You took my money and you've been lying to me for months. She stopped crying and looked at me directly for the first time since I'd started asking questions. What do you want me to say, Raymond? I want you to tell me the truth. The truth is that Western men come to Thailand thinking they can buy love and purpose and meaning, but all they're really buying is the illusion of those things. You gave me money because it made you feel important, not because you actually believed in some restaurant dream. Her voice was different now, colder, more calculating, like she was showing me who she really was for the first time. That's not true, I said. I gave you money because I loved you. You gave me money because you're a lonely old man who wanted to feel needed. And I let you feel needed because that's how I survive. That's how women like me survive in a country where men like Niran have all the power and money. So the whole relationship was fake. Everything we shared, everything we planned together, some of it was real, she said quietly. I did enjoy talking to you. You were kinder than most Western men I've met. But the restaurant, the partnership, the future we talked about, that was always just a story. I sat down heavily on my bed, feeling like the room was spinning. Where's my money? Gone. Used for what it was always going to be used for, keeping me in university, paying my rent, helping my family. And yes, paying some of Niran's expenses because that's the arrangement we have. What arrangement? He supports me financially, and I provide companionship. It's not prostitution. It's not a traditional relationship. It's something in between. Something that works for both of us. And I was just additional income. You were. She paused, like she was choosing her words carefully. You were. Hope. Hope that maybe I could find a way out of my arrangement with Niran, maybe build something legitimate with someone who actually cared about me. But Raymond, you didn't really care about me. You cared about who you imagined I was. That's not fair, isn't it? Did you ever ask me what I actually wanted from life? Or did you just assume I wanted to run a restaurant with you? Did you ever wonder why a 25-year-old university student would want to date a 54-year-old divorced man? Or did you just feel grateful that someone young and pretty was paying attention to you? I didn't answer because I couldn't. She was right. I'd been so desperate to feel valued, so eager to believe that someone could love me, that I'd never questioned whether our relationship made sense from her perspective. I need you to leave, I said. Raymond, please, just leave. She gathered her things and walked to the door. Before leaving, she turned back to me. For what it's worth, I am sorry. You're not a bad person. You're just lost. And you thought Thailand could fix that. But geography doesn't fix loneliness. After she left, I sat in my apartment for hours, trying to process what had happened. $20,000 gone. The woman I loved, gone. My purpose in Thailand, gone. I was back to being exactly what I'd been when I arrived, a middle-aged man with no direction and diminishing resources, except now I was in a foreign country where I didn't speak the language or understand the culture. I checked my bank balance. $400 left. Enough for maybe 2 weeks of basic living expenses and a one-way ticket back to Montreal if I could find a cheap flight. But going back meant admitting failure to Linda, to my kids, to everyone who'd watched me dramatically announce that I was starting over in Thailand. Going back meant returning to a life that had already proven empty and meaningless. I spent the next 3 days in my apartment, not eating, barely sleeping, trying to figure out what to do next. I could try to find work illegally, but that risked deportation and criminal charges. I could try to stretch my remaining money for a few more weeks, But then what? I could try to contact Niran and demand my money back, but that seemed both dangerous and pointless. On the fourth day, I called Linda. "Raymond," she sounded surprised. "Is everything okay?" "No," I said. "Everything's not okay. I fucked up, Linda. I fucked up really badly." I told her everything. The restaurant that didn't exist, the money I'd lost, the relationship that had been built on lies. She listened without interrupting, without saying, "I told you so," without making me feel worse than I already felt. "What do you need?" she asked when I finished. "I don't know. I can't afford to stay here, but I don't have anywhere to go back to. I gave up the apartment, quit my job, burned all my bridges." "You can stay with me for a while," she said, "until you figure out what comes next." "Why would you do that? After everything I put you through?" "Because you're the father of my children. Because we were married for 25 years. Because you're clearly suffering, and I don't want to see you destroy yourself completely. I don't deserve your help." "Maybe not, but you're getting it anyway." She wired me money for a plane ticket. Not a loan, a gift. She said I could pay her back when I was back on my feet, but we both knew that might never happen. The flight back to Montreal felt completely different from the flight to Bangkok 8 months earlier. Instead of hope and nervous excitement, I felt hollow and defeated. Instead of running towards something, I was retreating from everything I'd tried to build. But somewhere over the Pacific Ocean, I started writing in the journal I'd bought at the Bangkok airport. Not because I thought anyone would ever read it, but because I needed to try to understand what had happened to me, what I'd learned, what I could do differently. I realized that I'd gone to Thailand seeking external validation for internal emptiness. I'd thought that geography could fix character flaws, that a new country could make me a new person. But the problems I'd tried to escape in Canada, my loneliness, my need for validation, my tendency to try to buy love instead of earning it, had followed me to Thailand because they were inside me. Prani had been right about one thing. I hadn't really known her. I'd fallen in love with who I imagined she was, who I needed her to be, not who she actually was. I'd been so desperate to feel needed and valued that I'd ignored obvious red flags and accepted obvious lies. But there was also something else in my journal entries, something I hadn't expected. Relief. For the first time in years, I wasn't running from my problems or trying to purchase solutions. I was facing reality, however ugly it was, and there was a strange peace in that honesty. Linda met me at the airport. She looked older than I remembered, but also somehow stronger, more confident. The divorce had apparently been good for her. "You look terrible," she said. But she said it with concern, not cruelty. "I feel terrible. That's okay. Feeling terrible is sometimes the first step toward feeling better." She drove me to a small apartment she'd rented for me, not far from where she lived with our daughter, Sarah, who had moved back home after college. It was furnished with basics: bed, table, chair, small TV. Nothing fancy, but clean and safe and affordable. "Sarah wants to see you," Linda said as she helped me carry my 2 suitcases upstairs. "So does Michael. They know what happened, and they're not angry. They're worried about you." I don't know what to say to them. Start with the truth. Tell them you made mistakes, but you're trying to learn from them. That's all anyone can do. Over the next few weeks, I slowly started rebuilding some kind of life. I found a part-time job at a local insurance agency, not glamorous, but it paid enough to cover my rent and basic expenses. I started seeing a therapist twice a week, trying to understand the patterns of behavior that had led me to Thailand and to Prani. My relationship with my kids evolved into something I hadn't expected: friendship based on honesty rather than the performance of being a successful father. They respected my willingness to admit my failures and my commitment to changing the patterns that had created those failures. "Dad, we never expected you to be perfect," Sarah told me during one of our weekly dinners. "We just wanted you to be real." Linda and I developed a different kind of relationship too. Not romantic, but built on shared history and mutual respect rather than obligation or desperation. She started dating someone new, a kind man who appreciated her in ways I never had, and I found that I was genuinely happy for her. 6 months after returning to Montreal, I realized something had changed. My days were structured around small, achievable goals rather than grand fantasies. I woke up each morning knowing what I needed to do and feeling capable of doing it. I wasn't wealthy or particularly successful, but I was building a life based on who I actually was, rather than who I wished I could buy my way into becoming. I thought about Prani sometimes, but not with anger or regret. She'd been surviving the only way she knew how in a system that gave her limited options. I'd been a willing participant in a transaction that we'd both understood, even if we'd never articulated it clearly. She'd needed money, and I'd needed to feel needed. For a while, that exchange had worked for both of us. The phrase that stayed with me most from my time in Thailand was, "Mai pen rai." Never mind. It doesn't matter. Prani used to say it whenever I worried about small problems or cultural misunderstandings. At the time, I'd thought it meant my concerns weren't important, but now I understood it differently. My problems in Thailand had mattered. My loneliness, my confusion, my financial mistakes, they'd all been real and significant. But they'd also been fixable, learnable, survivable. The shame and regret I'd carried about my failures didn't have to define the rest of my life. The East hadn't had other plans for me. It had simply provided a mirror that reflected my Western delusions back at me with painful clarity. I'd gone to Thailand thinking I could escape myself, but instead I'd learned that true escape isn't geographic. It's psychological. It happens when you stop running from who you are and start building a life based on reality rather than fantasy. It happens when you face your problems instead of trying to buy your way out of them. It happens when you accept that meaning comes from small, consistent actions rather than dramatic gestures. I was 55 years old, living in a small apartment, working a modest job, and slowly paying back debts I'd incurred while chasing dreams that had never been realistic. But I was also more at peace than I'd been in decades, because for the first time in years, I was living honestly. Thailand hadn't fixed me, but it had broken me in ways that needed to be broken, stripped away illusions that needed to be stripped away, and forced me to confront truths about myself that I'd been avoiding for years. The East had indeed had other plans for me, not the plans I'd imagined, but the plans I'd actually needed. It had taught me that you can't buy your way into a meaningful life, that love earned through honesty is worth more than love purchased through desperation, and that the person you're running from will follow you anywhere until you stop running and start growing. Mai pen rai. It doesn't matter where you go, if you're still the same person when you get there. But it matters very much who you choose to become along the way.